Hiya guys, Freddy here. Now, this week, while I was recording my video, which will be coming out later this week, on GM Magazine issue 1, this issue contains an interview with Terry Pratchett from 1988, roughly the time the novel Sorcery came out. And that reminded me that I've probably never mentioned on the channel that Terry Pratchett used to be a member of my role-playing group. Now, this isn't a story about how great I am and I've got famous friends, because I don't. I have to admit, I never met the man. This is a story about how wonderful Terry Pratchett was in giving up his time for a bunch of idiots. This story begins with one of the guys in my gaming group, the guy who basically initiated the group, started it off because he was the eldest of us, called John. Now, John was more grown up. He was about 7 years older than the rest of us, so we were teenagers. He was in his mid-20s. He was married and he had a house. So that's where we would meet to game at. And he would put adverts up in local newsagents and things to get new players. He was organising it like a proper role-playing group instead of just a group of friends. But John is one of the most interesting people I've ever met. He's a fascinating guy. And his list of careers that he's had, because he's been a psychiatric nurse. He's run the psychiatric nursing for an entire area of Scotland in the past. He's also been a nurse in a vasectomy clinic. So he has some very interesting tales about that. He's worked in a casualty department. He's been a teacher for young children. And now he looks after young children. He's had a variety of careers, worked on help desks, everything. And he is a natural talker. He's not shy, he will speak to anybody. A great guy. Now, John was at a gaming convention at round about the time that magazine came out, so 1988, just after the novel Sorcery had come out, when Terry Pratchett was famous amongst the gaming community and the fantasy community, but he wasn't the iconic figure that he later became. He was quite well known. So John was at this convention and was staying in the same hotel as Terry Pratchett. Came down from breakfast on the morning of one of the days of the convention and saw Terry Pratchett sitting by himself in the restaurant, getting breakfast, and most of the other tables were full. So John, being John and being able to speak to anybody, walked up to the table Terry Pratchett was sat at alone and said, "Do you mind if I sit here?" To which Terry Pratchett said, "Yeah, sure." And John started talking to him, and he explained how he was there because he liked playing Dungeons and Dragons and Shadowrun and lots of other games. Terry Pratchett talked about his own experience with various role-playing games. He played some Dungeons and Dragons in the past and knew all of that scene, especially as he was attending conventions. So John mentioned about our club and asked for permission to name it the Broken Drum Role-Playing Club, named after the famous bar in Ankh-Morpork in the novels. And Terry Pratchett was like, "Sure, you are now the official Broken Drum Role-Playing Club, as authorised by Terry Pratchett." But John did more than that. When he got home, John, in creating our group to be a proper role-playing club, used to write up our adventures into a newsletter. Because as the group came large, even though only about 6 people would turn up to each session, we were 6 people out of maybe 12 total people who would turn up from time to time. And to keep everybody updated on what the adventures were going on, John would write all this into a newsletter. And he would send Terry Pratchett a copy of this newsletter. And Terry Pratchett would reply and write a very short, a paragraph or so, editorial back to John to publish in it. So not only were we the official Broken Drum Role-Playing Club, but we had a newsletter with an editorial written by Terry Pratchett. Now this went on for a couple of years, and our group kind of fell apart a bit. John was going through some things, and we weren't able to play at his house anymore, especially as he was working different shifts. Psychiatric nurses have some very variable shifts. So our game group moved on. We closed down to a smaller group, so the newsletters ended. And there was no need for him to send them off to Terry Pratchett, and Terry Pratchett no longer responded to them. And so that drifted into history. And we kind of forgot about it until, I'm afraid, the sad passing of Terry Pratchett. And we did all spend a game session talking about how, even though he'd never played with us, we were a man down that night. So this isn't a story about how I know famous people, how Terry Pratchett played D&D with me. This is a story about how Terry Pratchett was such a lovely guy that he would give the time of day to a bunch of idiots writing about their Shadowrun, their Dungeons and Dragons campaigns, their Rifts campaigns in a newsletter, and he would comment on them and talk about what our characters were up to, make jokes at our expense. A wonderful guy, and sadly missed. But anyway, I think I've whittled on for quite long enough as usual, so thank you very much for watching. But as always, most of all, you look after yourselves and everybody around you. Bye now.